Can you hear the ukulele?
Yep.
Yes.
Feel its magical powers? Last night I was in New York City because I did New York City press and stuff yesterday, and I was with my friend Jason Webley, and we got back to my hotel after having some dinner to have like one last celebration nightcap, and we were in the elevator of this hotel, and these three really punk rock looking girls who like couldn't have been more than 18 or 19 were in the elevator with us, and they were looking lost, and they were asking us how to get to some basement bar, and we were like, what are you going to? And they were like, we're going to the International Women's Day party in the basement. And we were like, ooh. I was like, but I'm so tired. So I went to my room and I got my ukulele, and we sort of stalked them, and we found out where this party was, and we paid our $10 donation to something that we had never heard of to get in. And then we saw the three girls, and they were like, you came! And it was this really not so exciting DJ party with everyone standing around awkwardly. So I took the three girls, who had no idea who I was at all, into the bathroom, into the handicap stall, asked for consent, and played them this song. True story. In my mind, in a future 5 years from now, I'm 120 pounds, and I never get hungover, because I will be the picture of discipline, never minding what state I'm in. I will be someone I admire, and it's funny how I imagined that I would be that person now, but it does not seem to have happened. Maybe I've just forgotten how to see. I'm not exactly the person that I thought I'd be. And in my mind, in the faraway here and now, I've become in control somehow. I never lose my wallet, because I will be the picture of discipline, never fucking up anything. And I'll be a good defensive driver, which always feels very pertinent in Boston.
Yes.
It's funny how I imagine that I would be that person now, but it does not seem to have happened. Maybe I've just forgotten how to see that I'm not exactly the person that I want to be. And in my mind, when I'm old, I am beautiful, planting tulips and vegetables, which I will mindfully watch over. Not like me now, I'm so busy with everything that I don't look at anything, but I'm sure I'll look when I am older. And it's funny how I imagined that I would be that person now, but that's not what I want. If that's what I wanted, then I'd be giving up somehow. How strange to see that I don't want to be the person that I want to be. And in my mind, I imagine so many things that aren't really happening. And when they put me in the ground, I'll start pounding the lid
goodness.
I have had a day that required that song. Have you?
Yes.
Quite some song.
I'm gonna play you. I'll play you one of the record songs. You guys probably all know this. Most of the songs on the record are not ukulele songs, or piano songs. But there's no piano here, which means that this ukulele is very handy. Even though it's a little bit of a liar, because it doesn't sound like most of the record. But there's two songs on the record on ukulele, so I'll play you one of them or both of them or whatever. I don't really have a plan.
Yes.
I'm plan free. But it actually just occurred to me. I wrote at least one of the songs on this record in Boston.
You wrote Judy Blume in Boston too.
Did I write Judy Blume in Boston?
Yeah.
How do you know that?
Because
That's so weird. Oh, because I played it for Casey Long.
yep.
That's right. Yes, and Bigger on the Inside. And Thing About Things, which I'm going to play for you now, I don't think I've ever really talked much about how I wrote it, but I wrote it in upstate New York in a borrowed house in a town called Red Hook. And it's a true story that took place in Harvard Square. Dun, dun, dun. R.A.P. Upstairs on the Square bar. Sunglasses. Here we go. I've loaned a lot of things to a lot of friends, like dresses and records and books. And a lot of the time, I never see them again. And in a weird way, I think that works. I'm just staring out beyond everyone at the toys. The thing about things is that they can turn evil when you start to forget what they're for. So if you're not sure what you did with my sweater, I'll just have to love you a little bit more. I had a ring that belonged to my grandfather. He was a Mason and gay. True story. And he was distant and bitter. For all of my childhood, we never had much to say. He wasn't the type to give tokens of affection, so I stole the ring when he died. And 20 years on, when I lost it in a bar, I thought that's fine, I don't want him in my life. 'Cause the thing about things is that they can meaning things nobody actually said. And if he couldn't make something mean something for me, I had to make up what it meant. It's a poem, and I think it keeps going. And I've borrowed and loaned lots of things. And 3 nights ago, in the bar where I lost it, the bartender gave me bling. And I lay in bed, my phone in my hand, thinking, what can I fix with which app? And I call my grandfather, and he doesn't answer, and I have to make peace with that fact. 'Cause the thing about things is that they can start meaning things nobody actually said. And if you're not allowed to love people alive, then you learn how to love people dead. The thing about things is that they can still meaning things nobody actually said. And if you're not allowed to love people alive, then you learn how to love people dead. That really happened. Life's crazy. I was explaining to a journalist the other day That song took 20 years to write, because technically I couldn't write it unless, you get it. There's a lot of songs on the record like that, like songs that just dated. I made a mistake today. I made a mistake that I should never make and that you should never make, which is if you're Amanda Palmer and you've put out a record, don't ever read your Boston press.
No, say it ain't.
Well, sometimes it's good. Just, don't read your press in general. It's like, you know how you feel when you go to your parents' house and you're like, I figured everything else out, but you guys can still make me feel 12. That's how I feel about the Boston press. Like, yeah. But there's a specific thing that's come out of a couple of the pieces of Boston press that really twist the knife, which is like, The general gist seems to be, why do you think you deserve to say that? And why do people care? And I'm like, well, when you ask that, you're not just judging me, you're judging the people who like my music, which seems mean. And Neil gets the same thing. He'll get reviewers being like, we don't understand why people like these books.
Maybe it's not for you.
Maybe it's not for you. Maybe you have no heart. But I read something today that actually really got under my skin, which is why I shouldn't read reviews, especially when everything is going so well right now. I've never made a record that's been more understood and accepted by people. The journalists come second, but just people get this record, and it makes me so happy. Which is why it hurts, especially when your hometown just knows how to just twist the knife in my viscera. And it was almost even meant as a compliment, maybe. But But what the journalist said is, Amanda Palmer has made a performance out of her life, and the music is just this afterthought. And I'm like, I also don't know if that's just a thing that people say to women who bother you with their feelings, because we should just be busy taking care of our children and not bothering you with our feelings. But there's something particularly I'm an artist. It's my job. It's my job. And if art is an afterthought, which it usually is, there's the first thought, which is the experience of your life, and then there's the thought after, which is the art. This song is a pretty good example of that. I wrote this song in Harvard Square. Neil and I were living in this rental house. I was going in between two different friends in chemo, one of them in Cambridge and one of them in Boston. And the Boston bombing had just happened. And things were pretty bleak. And I hadn't written any music in a long time. And Neil and I were terrible housemates. We just couldn't figure out how to work around each other. So I actually snuck into the backyard to write this song, into the driveway. And just as I sat down, I was feeling like such a teenager. I was like, fuck you, I'll go outside. Neil Gaiman. And then I hid in the driveway, and the recycling truck came into the driveway, and I was like, good system. Good system. Recycling truck. I finished it. You think I'd shut their children from the way that they're talking, and there's no point in responding, 'cause it will not make them stop. And I am tired of explaining and of seeing so much hating in the very same safe haven where I used to just see helping. I've been drunk and skipping dinner, eating skin from off my fingers, and I tried to call my brother, but he no longer exists. I keep forgetting to remember that he would have been much prouder if he saw me shake these insults off instead of getting bitter. I am bigger on the inside, but you have to come inside to see me. Otherwise you're only hating other people's low-res copies. You'd think I'd learn my lesson from the way they keep on testing my capacity for pain and my resolve to not get violent. But though my skin is thick and certain spots can still be gotten, it is typically human of me thinking I am different to friends hooked up to hospital machines to fix their cancer. And there is no better place than from this waiting room to answer the French kid who wrote an email to the website late last night. His father raped him and he's scared. He asked me, how do you keep fighting? And the truth is I don't know. I think it's funny that my hand when you woke up. I had been crying in the darkness. We all die alone, but I am so glad that you are here. You whispered, we are so much bigger on the inside. You, me, everybody. Someday when you're lying where I am, you'll finally get it. Beauty, we are so much bigger than another one can ever see. But trying is the point of life, so don't stop trying. Promise me. All of the songs on the record are sadder than that song. I don't usually do this at in-stores, but I wanna see if you guys wanna ask anything about the record, because I can. I mean, I can do whatever I want. I have the mic. Does anyone want to ask anything, or say anything, or share anything, or come insult me in person?
Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are?
This is an outrage. I think I'm a fucking woman telling the truth about my life in 2019 is what I fucking think I am.
There you go.
So there.
I have a question.
Yeah.
After you wrote the album, who were you most nervous to let listen to it?
After I wrote the album, who was I most nervous to let listen to it? Probably my mom. It's always my mom. Wouldn't it be? I mean, Neil a little bit. I didn't play him. I mean, he knew most of the songs. I didn't play him the record until like 4 days ago. I made it in September, and I've heard it lots of times, but he's been really busy. And I didn't want to just email it to him. It just seemed wrong. And we've also learned this lesson, me and him, about like when we make art, especially really raw stuff that has the other one in it, because we've both done that. We have the board games are up here. I can see them. There's a bunch of Monopolies right there, and there's a Golden Girls puzzle, which is awesome. Come on out, it's a blast. You can also listen to me talk about abortion and cancer while you buy the record.
The game of life.
The game of life. Oh my God! Have you guys ever? Have any of you, as adults, revisited the fucking Game of Life?
No, but I have the game of life.
It's so dark. It's so dark. It's so gendered. You get there are pink people and blue people, and then you either are a successful person in the Game of Life because you are a doctor, or you're a failure because you're an artist. It's pretty fucking funny.
Someone made the game of real life where you can be gay and take drugs and have sex without procreation.
Yay!
It's real. It's a real game.
Yes, and you don't just accrue little pink and blue pegs in the back of your car.
Real games with
There was a real question.
Real games with real content.
So Neil and I have figured out that it's actually really important when we have stuff that we need to share with each other that might be sensitive. We make sure we're together. He'll read me stuff. Hi. Wow, you just patted me on the bum, but I didn't want to. Bye. Nice man. I have such a weird job. This is my job. You guys believe this is my fucking job?
It is a job for me, believe me.
Thank you. That was weird. To get to your question, Neil and I get together and we will take a moment. And it was actually really hard to find a moment in the last week that, we had 2 hours free with no child to just sit down and listen to it. So we did it at 7 in the morning 4 days ago. We tried to do it at night, but Neil fell asleep during the first song. And I was like, I'm not going to take that personally. I'm tired. But I set an alarm, and then I was really smart. I woke him up with a cup of tea and was tea, record. And it was a really emotional experience to lie there and listen to the whole record with him, and he cried a lot. I didn't quite realize how triggering this record would be for him. And when it got to the abortion songs and the miscarriage lyrics and stuff, he fucking lost it. But I was there. I got to cuddle him. But, he's a very strong man for being able to withstand the, sword-wielding, truth-telling woman that he bizarrely chose to be with. Because there it is. There's our story on our fucking record album. But he kind of likes it. I think it's why he picked me. He didn't not know this when he got together with me. And we didn't really know exactly what was coming, but he probably knew that he wasn't marrying a meek, silent person. But it was also it was hard to watch him go through that. Not in a bad way, but it was it was hanging on to a person in a boat in a storm. So yeah, if that answers your question.
What did your mom think?
My mom hasn't weighed in yet. She was very proud that NPR said that I made a good record. Same way she was really proud. All these amazing things happened with the Dresden Dolls in the early days, and it wasn't until we got a one-sentence mention in the New Yorker that she was like, "What? The New Yorker? I read that." And I was like, anyway, I love you, Mom.
What kind of environment do you recommend for listening to the record? Because I didn't
Not this one.
Yeah. I didn't listen to it yesterday because I just how
probably quiet and either in a quiet place, dimly lit, with some alcohol, and maybe with some loved ones. It's a nice record to listen to not alone, which is why I'm so happy and grateful that I'm doing these listening parties. You forget how powerful it is to be in a group of people listening to something as opposed to just on your own with headphones. It can really kind of change the nature of what the music feels like. And music used to be a thing that no one really did alone very much. It was always done in groups and tribes and circles, and music's become a really solitary endeavor lately, and I don't know if that's necessarily good for us.
Do you feel like becoming a mother has really changed the way you look at music and the way you write it and the way you feel it?
The question was, do I feel like has becoming a mother changed the way I feel about music and how I write it and how I mean, not really. It's changed the way I listen to music very practically, because I have listened to a lot of music in the last 3 years that I just wouldn't have listened to if I didn't have a 1, 2, and 3-year-old. I've listened to a lot of Beatles because Ash loves the Beatles. And I've listened to a lot of the fucking Frozen soundtrack. But I've managed to incorporate that into my life's business, and I love watching someone take such unfettered, unironic, unintellectual pleasure in music. Like, there's something really good about that reminder. Sometimes I look over at Ash and he's just on the sofa staring into the speakers, like lost in his imagination, lost in sound, listening to the Frozen soundtrack, and he wants complete, like if you disturb him, he gets pissed. He's listening.
Oh my god.
And I just want to cry when I see things like that, because I remember listening to music that way, and I feel like I've gotten so dirty as an adult, like so cynical and so intellectual, and we listen to music and we're always measuring it, or we want more of the same thing, or we don't listen to music the way we did when we were 3. And he reminds me, like, he's a really handy reminder that music can just be pure and powerful and there for your enjoyment. I also wrote some songs in the wake of Ash that I wouldn't have written.
Yeah.
That too.
Yeah, I like cried through the whole Mother's confession.
Yeah, and that's the funny song on the record.
You have to laugh or resist your crying.
Yeah, this is in my opinion, this is the funniest record I've ever made. And it's the darkest. But it had to be that way. Does anyone else want to ask anything? Yeah.
Yeah, do you consider this album like more confessional or personal than like your work in the Dresden Dolls or previous work? Or is there like a different type of attitude that like your confession or personal perspective might have had back then?
I think all my records have been pretty much equally confessional, but some have more layers of clothing. Literally, like there's songs on the first Dresden Dolls record that were, straight out of my heart and head, trying to describe certain feelings, and those songs might not have been quite as direct.
Right.
They were veiled in a little bit more metaphor or poetry or costume or whatever. But that's how I thought you were supposed to write songs. Because that's what all the songs that I worshipped and loved did. Mm-hmm. I didn't listen to much direct music. All the music that was cool was hard to figure out. And I was like, okay, well, then that's what you're supposed to do. Right. Make music that's kind of hard to figure out. And also then you can hide.
Yeah.
Like, if something is going to be interpretable, you're not really accountable for having ever said it. Right. And with a record like this, there's no hiding. I'm just telling it very straight. And I don't think that means that that's the right way to make music. I think that's just what I had to do right now to survive and to offer something worthwhile out of whatever I'm going through. And that might change again. If and when the Dresden Dolls make another record. I don't know how, like, on the spectrum of the blender, how direct or indirect the songs will be. But I know that you're allowed to do fucking anything you want. As an artist, you're allowed to just skip around and go from complete and utter unadorned memoir 1 minute to total sci-fi bizarro the next, and that's your fucking right as an artist. Everyone else can figure out what to do with it. That's their problem. Anyone else have a question before we get to it?
Sorry.
Hi, no, don't be sorry. I asked.
I have questions, if that is okay. First, Judy Bloom. Judy Bloom, I think, was the first song that made me cry in probably about 6 years. And it means the world to me. And I just kind of wanted to know where your head was at with that. And then my second question would be, as an artist, do you find it almost like your voices in not schizophrenic voices, but like the voices in your head, does it just get so loud that it's so hard to just create and be okay with it?
What a question.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sure I could find some interesting things to say about both of those things. So, the question number one was Judy Bloom, and could I talk about where I was at when I wrote that? And then the second question, and I think I can actually come up with a pretty good answer that ties these both together. The second question was, do the voices in my head get so loud that they drive me insane and make it impossible to create? It's funny with Judy Blume. I wrote that song in my apartment here, and I wrote it because it just like occurred to me one day. I forget why. I was probably reading something on the internet, and it literally occurred to me, like those moments in your life where you're like, oh shit, I forgot about Judy Blume. People have been asking me for 15 years what my influences are, and I fucking have never said Judy Blume. How did that happen? Like, how did I forget someone so massive? And it's almost like she was just so obvious and so part of the landscape that, that like I might as well cite Oxygen as an influence on my music. I mean, it's just there. I can't make music without it, but why would I talk about it? And I think when I wrote Bigger on the Inside, that last song that I played for you guys, I was in a very dark place, if you couldn't tell. And I hadn't written music for a long time because the voices in my head, the angry ones, the insecure ones, the suffering ones, they wouldn't shut up. They were taking up most of the real estate that year. And I think I also, my friend was dying. I was depressed. And I was displaying all the symptoms of, basic depression. And the thing about depression is it's not inspiring. You don't wake up going like, here I am in my terrible depression. Like, it's so artistic, it's so bohemian. I will sit here with my hand stapled to my forehead and write about my depression. When you're depressed, you don't want to do fuck all. You're paralytic. And, especially that year, right after the Boston bombing happened, I felt so misunderstood and so illegitimized and just so scared to open my mouth that it just sort of shut. I was just like, why bother to say anything? It's just going to be misconstrued, misunderstood, and I don't even know what I have to say anymore. I'm done. I just don't have anything to contribute right now. I'm too sad. And I just went into like emotional cave for a while. Well, the interesting thing about this song, and I actually don't tell this story very often, that I wrote most of this song in our backyard and sketched most of it out, and it was like, I don't know, it was maybe 70% done, and then I had that terrible sinking feeling looking at it going like, oh, like, I may never finish you, and if I never finish you, you're going to be a song that just falls away. No one will ever hear it. And God, this is really long and repetitive and depressing, and maybe it's not a good song anyway, whatever. And I just sort of chucked it in a folder. And then a few weeks later, this was the Kickstarter year. This was the year I was flying all over the world and doing house parties. And a few weeks after that, I was delivering a house party. I forget where, but somewhere in the Midwest.
Minneapolis, I think.
And I thought, and I flew to Minneapolis, and I was waiting to be picked up by the host of the party. And I thought, if I finish this song right now, I can play it tonight for people who will not judge me. Like, I will feel safe with these people. I wasn't going to show up in Boston at a show and play that song. I would have just been too afraid, and I wouldn't have finished it. And there was something about getting outside of Boston and being around a group of people from Minneapolis who hadn't read the Boston Phoenix or the Boston Globe, whatever, telling me that I was a terrorist sympathizer and a terrible poet and a terrible person. And that's what finished the song. was actually physically being in a place where I felt safe enough to play it for some people who weren't going to malign me for it. And like a lot of the material on this record is like that. It's sort of like, you know, it came out at this one moment that it had to come out because I sort of needed my therapeutic moment and managed to hold the gun to my head at the right moment to get the song out to the people who I thought could hear it. And, you know, and for that reason, like, going on a tour with a record like this feels really weird. Because I'm not touring small venues, I'm touring like 2,000 and 3,000 seat theaters. And it's scary. Because not everyone will be on board. And, like, people have walked out of the show because they're just like, it's good, but I can't handle it. So that's why I've actually added a lot of humor to the show. It's now, like, half stand-up, half weeping. Like, ripping a page out of Hannah Gadsby's book. I'm just going to, like, take you into the dark, but then we're going to dance. And then we're going to come, and then we're going to go in, and then we're going to come in, and now we're cha-chaing. So, does that sort of answer your question? Kind of? I'm gonna be done. Do you want one more song?
Yes,
like
please.
some cheerful
Yes.
pick me upper. And then I'll sign records. And we also have the book. So a lot of you must be patrons. Are any of you guys patrons? If you're not a patron, you haven't been able to get the book until today. So the softback book, which is sort of like the uber extendo photographic liner notes of the records out too, and we're selling it. And I'll see you at the fucking Orpheum.
Woo! Yeah.
Woo! That's out of tune. Somebody tell a joke.
What do you get when you drive a piano down a mine shaft?
What?
A flat minor.
Oh!
I'm not sorry.
That's a good one.
Wow, that's good.
Neil has a really bad writer joke he's been telling everybody. You want to hear it?
Yes.
God, yes.
You heard about the person that lost their left side?
What?
You heard about the person that lost their left side?
The person that lost their left side?
Lost their left side.
What?
It's all right.
What did the pirate say when he lost his shirt? Shiver my nipples.
Why do you never see rhinoceroses hiding in trees? Because they are so damn good at it.
Great bad joke. The bad Neil joke is there's a funeral and the casket is there and the widow's standing by the casket and this man, this stranger interloper, comes up to the casket and bows his head and goes over to the widow and says, "Excuse me, may I say a word?" And she's like, "Oh, sure, go ahead." And he stands up in front of the assembled people and says, "Plethora." and then he walks away from the casket, and the wife grabs his sleeve and says, "Thank you. That means a lot."
You do that.
Sorry.
Do you need like a board?
No, I just need a
Delta whiskey, have that.
Free whiskey.
I brought a glass for the first time in my life. I figured why not? I've tried it for a long time. It's Jameson's.
As soon as I tune this E string.
It's delish, I'll tell you what.
Oh, I should say.
Oh, it's all.
Instagram loves your plethora joke.
Pat from him himself.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just do this because I have to be happy.
when you were here before. Could I look you in the eye? You're just like an angel. Your skin makes me cry. You float like a feather in a beautiful world. You're so fucking special. I wish I was special, but I'm weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? I'm on the I don't care if it hurts. Yep. Haven't played this in a really long time. Just a palate cleanser. I don't care if it hurts. I wanna have control. What a perfect body. I want a perfect soul. I want you to notice when I'm not around. You're so fucking special. I wish I was special, but I'm what the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. She's running. She runs. Whatever makes you happy. Whatever you want. You're so fucking special. I wish I was special. Everybody! But I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. I don't belong A huge thank you to Newbury Comics for hosting us. In their store, and I am gonna stay and sign, and if I can humbly ask you guys, this is such a weird fucking record. Tell people about it. You're gonna have to sell this one by hand. But if there was ever a good word of mouth record, this is it. So
send it to the people who you actually think will like it. And I love you.
Love you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.